The silent ambassador, Captain Marcus Reed, stood on the observation deck of the diplomatic vessel Harmony, watching the swirling nebula paint the darkness in shades of violet and gold. 3 months into humanity's first official contact with the Zephyrian Empire, and every conversation still felt like walking through a minefield. The Zephyrians were logical, precise, and utterly mystified by human emotion. Today's meeting would be different. Ambassador Nixara would arrive soon, and Marcus had heard whispers that she was unlike other Zephyrians, where her people spoke in mathematical formulas and cold facts. She seemed to possess something resembling curiosity about the strange emotional creatures called humans. The transport bay doors hissed open, and Marcus turned to see her enter. Nixara moved with the fluid grace of her species, her silver skin catching the ambient light like liquid mercury. Her large dark eyes held an intelligence that seemed to pierce through everything they observed. She wore the traditional diplomatic robes of her people, but something about her posture suggested she was uncomfortable with the formality. "Captain Reed," she said, her voice carrying the musical quality typical of Zephyrians. "I trust the meeting preparations are adequate." Marcus nodded, studying her face. Unlike other Zephyrians he'd met, Nixara's expressions weren't completely neutral. There were micro-movements, tiny shifts that suggested something deeper beneath the surface. "Everything's ready, Ambassador. Though I have to ask, why did you specifically request this meeting? Your people have made it clear they find our emotional nature problematic." Nixara tilted her head slightly. A gesture Marcus had learned indicated deep thought among her species. "Your people fascinate me, Captain. We Zephyrians pride ourselves on logic and efficiency. Yet humans accomplish remarkable things through what you call passion and creativity. I wish to understand this contradiction." As they walked toward the conference room, Marcus found himself looking at her differently. There was something almost vulnerable in the way she asked questions, as if she was searching for something her own people couldn't provide. "Tell me," she continued, "how do humans express concepts that have no logical foundation? Your art, your poetry, your music, they serve no practical purpose, yet you value them above resources or territory." Marcus stopped walking, struck by the genuine curiosity in her voice. For the first time since contact began, he felt like he was talking to an individual rather than a representative of an alien empire. "Sometimes," he said carefully, "the most important things can't be explained with words or logic. They have to be felt, experienced. Beauty isn't something you can measure or quantify. It's something that exists in the space between what we see and what we feel." Nixara's eyes widened slightly, and Marcus caught what might have been the first genuine expression of surprise he'd ever seen from a Zephyrian. The beauty beyond words, how the Terran Empire was born humanity's first galactic war. "I described her beauty without words." And the alien girl couldn't hold back her tears. Part 1. The silent ambassador, Captain Marcus Reed, stood on the observation deck of the diplomatic vessel Harmony, watching the swirling nebula paint the darkness in shades of violet and gold. 3 months into humanity's first official contact with the Zephyrian Empire, and every conversation still felt like walking through a minefield. The Zephyrians were logical, precise, and utterly mystified by human emotion. Today's meeting would be different. Ambassador Nixara would arrive soon, and Marcus had heard whispers that she was unlike other Zephyrians. Where her people spoke in mathematical formulas and cold facts, she seemed to possess something resembling curiosity about the strange emotional creatures called humans. The transport bay doors hissed open, and Marcus turned to see her enter. Nixara moved with the fluid grace of her species, her silver skin catching the ambient light like liquid mercury. Her large dark eyes held an intelligence that seemed to pierce through everything they observed. She wore the traditional diplomatic robes of her people, but something about her posture suggested she was uncomfortable with the formality. "Captain Reed," she said, her voice carrying the musical quality typical of Zephyrians. "I trust the meeting preparations are adequate." Marcus nodded, studying her face. Unlike other Zephyrians he'd met, Nyxora's expressions weren't completely neutral. There were micro-movements, tiny shifts that suggested something deeper beneath the surface. "Everything's ready, Ambassador. Though I have to ask, why did you specifically request this meeting? Your people have made it clear they find our emotional nature ... problematic." Nyxara tilted her head slightly. A gesture Marcus had learned indicated deep thought among her species. "Your people fascinate me, Captain. We Zephyrians pride ourselves on logic and efficiency. Yet humans accomplish remarkable things through what you call passion and creativity. I wish to understand this contradiction." As they walked toward the conference room, Marcus found himself looking at her differently. There was something almost vulnerable in the way she asked questions, as if she was searching for something her own people couldn't provide. "Tell me," she continued, "how do humans express concepts that have no logical foundation? Your art, your poetry, your music, they serve no practical purpose, yet you value them above resources or territory." Marcus stopped walking, struck by the genuine curiosity in her voice. For the first time since contact began, he felt like he was talking to an individual rather than a representative of an alien empire. "Sometimes," he said carefully, "the most important things can't be explained with words or logic. They have to be felt, experienced. Beauty isn't something you can measure or quantify. It's something that exists in the space between what we see and what we feel." Nyxora's eyes widened slightly, and Marcus caught what might have been the first genuine expression of surprise he'd ever seen from a Zephyrian. Part 2. The Language of Silence. The formal negotiations had ended hours ago, but Marcus and Nyxara remained in the observation lounge, surrounded by the vast tapestry of stars. The other diplomats had retired, leaving them alone with the endless cosmos stretched before them. "Your people speak of efficiency," Marcus said, breaking a comfortable silence that had settled between them. "But what about wonder? When you look out there at all those stars, what do you feel?" Nyxara stood perfectly still, her reflection ghost-like in the transparent aluminum viewport. "We see stellar masses, gravitational fields, resource potential. We calculate distances and analyze spectral data." She paused, her voice dropping almost to a whisper. "But lately, when I look at stars, I find myself thinking of things that have no designation in our language." Marcus moved closer, careful not to invade what he'd learned was considered appropriate personal space for her species. "Like what?" "Like the way light travels across impossible distances just to reach us in this moment. How each photon began its journey before either of our civilizations existed, and yet here we are, receiving their message." Her voice carried an emotion Marcus couldn't identify. "Is this what you call poetry?" Marcus smiled, feeling something shift in the space between them. "That's exactly what poetry is. Finding meaning in connections that logic can't explain." Nyxara turned to face him, and Marcus was startled to see her dark eyes glistening with what could only be unshed tears. "Captain, I must confess something. Since arriving here, I have been experiencing ... irregularities, emotional responses that my training should have eliminated. My people would consider this a malfunction." "Maybe it's not a malfunction," Marcus said gently. "Maybe it's evolution." Words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither fully understood. Nyxora's composure, so perfect and controlled since their first meeting, began to crack like ice under spring sun. "There is something about the way you humans exist," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "You create beauty for no logical reason. You sacrifice efficiency for aesthetics. You choose connection over advantage. Watching you has made me question everything I believed about the superiority of pure logic." Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. This wasn't just about diplomacy anymore. Nyxara was risking everything: her position, her standing among her people, possibly her entire identity, to explore concepts her civilization had abandoned eons ago. "In my culture," he said carefully, "we have a saying: beauty is truth, truth. Beauty. It means that sometimes the most profound truths can't be found through analysis or calculation. They can only be discovered through experiencing something that moves you beyond reason." Nyxara closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, tears were flowing freely down her silver cheeks. "I think," she whispered, "I am beginning to understand what you mean by beautiful." The breaking point the next morning brought crisis. Marcus woke to urgent communications from both Earth Command and the Zephyrian High Council. Somehow, word of his unconventional diplomatic methods had reached the highest levels of both governments, and neither side was pleased. Admiral Patterson's face filled the holographic display in Marcus's quarters, his expression grim. "Reed, what the hell are you doing up there? We're getting reports that you've compromised the ambassador's psychological stability. The Zephyrians are threatening to withdraw from negotiations entirely." Marcus ran a hand through his hair, exhaustion weighing on him like gravity. "Sir, I think we're on the verge of a breakthrough. Ambassador Nyxara is beginning to understand human concepts of emotion and creativity. This could change everything. Or it could start a war," Patterson snapped. "The Zephyrians view emotional compromise as a form of mental illness. If they believe we've somehow infected their ambassador with human irrationality, they might see it as an act of aggression." Before Marcus could respond, his door chimed. He opened it to find Nyxara standing in the corridor, her usual composure, completely shattered. Her eyes were red from crying, and her hands trembled as she clutched a small device. "Captain," she said, her voice barely audible, "I need your help. My superiors have ordered me to submit to immediate psychological reconditioning. They intend to erase everything I've experienced here, everything I've learned about beauty and wonder and—" She struggled with the words, ... about feeling alive. Marcus felt something ignite in his chest, a protective fury that surprised him with its intensity. "They can't do that. You're a sentient being making your own choices." "Not according to Zephyrian law," Nyxara replied, tears flowing again. "I am property of the state, designed for a specific function. Deviation from that function is considered corruption." She held up the device in her hands. "This is a neural inhibitor. Once activated, I will return to my previous state of emotional neutrality. I will remember our conversations, but I will no longer feel their significance." The weight of her words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Everything they had shared, every moment of wonder and discovery, would be reduced to mere data in her memory banks. "There has to be another way," Marcus said desperately. "You could request asylum with humanity. We would protect you." Nyxara shook her head sadly. "That would mean abandoning my people forever, and it would likely trigger the very conflict we're trying to avoid. The Zephyrians would see my defection as proof that humans are a corrupting influence." Marcus stared at her, feeling helpless in the face of an impossible choice. Save one individual and potentially doom both civilizations to war, or allow the most beautiful thing he'd ever witnessed, a mind awakening to the possibilities of emotion and creativity, to be destroyed. "Before I activate this device," Nyxara whispered, "I want you to know that knowing you, learning from you, has been the most meaningful experience of my existence. You showed me that there are truths beyond logic, beauty beyond function. Even if I forget how it feels, I will remember that it was possible." The impossible choice. Marcus stood frozen, watching Nyxara hold the neural inhibitor with trembling hands. The weight of the moment pressed down on him like the gravity of a collapsing star. Everything they had built, every connection they had forged, balanced on the edge of oblivion. "Wait," he said suddenly, an idea forming in his mind. What if? There was a third option. What if you could return to your people, but carry something with you that couldn't be erased? Nyxara looked up, hope flickering in her dark eyes. "I don't understand." Marcus moved to his personal effects, retrieving a small object he'd carried since leaving Earth. It was a simple thing, a pressed flower from his grandmother's garden, preserved between sheets of transparent material. Nothing remarkable by any technological standard, yet it had comforted him through countless lonely nights in space. "This is called a forget-me-not," he said, holding it out to her. "It's just a flower, but to humans it represents memory, true love, and the bonds that transcend physical separation. Even if they erase your emotions, they can't erase the fact that this exists." Nyxara took the flower with reverent hands, studying its delicate blue petals. "It serves no logical purpose," she whispered. "Exactly. And that's what makes it perfect. Every time you see it, even without emotions, you'll remember that there was once a human who thought beauty was important enough to preserve a dying flower. You'll remember that efficiency isn't the only way to measure worth." Tears flowed down her silver cheeks as understanding dawned. "You're giving me a piece of your irrational humanity." "I'm giving you proof," Marcus corrected. "Proof that wonder exists, that beauty matters, that connections between minds can transcend species and logic. They can take away your ability to feel it, but they can't take away the fact that it happened." Nyxara closed her eyes, pressing the flower to her chest. When she opened them again, her expression had changed. There was still sadness there, still fear, but also something that looked like peace. "I understand now," she said. "The true power of beauty isn't in the feeling it creates. It's in the proof it provides that there are things worth preserving beyond survival and efficiency." She activated the neural inhibitor with steady hands, and Marcus watched in heartbreak as the light of wonder slowly faded from her eyes. But when the process was complete, she still held the flower, still looked at it with something that might not have been emotion, but was certainly recognition. "Captain Reed," she said, her voice once again carrying the neutral tone of her people. "I must return to my superiors now. However, I find myself curious about this object you have given me. Its preservation appears to defy logical purpose." Marcus smiled sadly. "Sometimes, Ambassador, the most important things do." As she turned to leave, Nyxara paused at the doorway. "Captain, I believe I will recommend that my people continue these negotiations. You humans possess qualities that, while illogical, may prove valuable to our understanding of the universe." She left without another word, but Marcus noticed she carried the flower with careful reverence, as if it were the most precious thing in the galaxy. The legacy of wonder 6 months later, Marcus stood once again on the observation deck of the Harmony, but everything had changed. The negotiations had succeeded beyond anyone's wildest expectations. Not only had humanity and the Zephyrian Empire forged a lasting peace treaty, but something unprecedented had begun to emerge within Zephyrian society. Ambassador Nyxara approached him with her characteristic fluid grace, but there was something different about her now. She still carried herself with Zephyrian precision, but there were small changes: the way she paused to observe the stars, the careful manner in which she tended to a small garden of earth flowers that now grew in her diplomatic quarters. "Captain Reed," she said, her voice carrying its familiar neutral tone, "I have come to deliver news from the High Council." "Good news, I hope?" Marcus replied, noting how she still carried the pressed forget-me-not, now mounted in a place of honor on her diplomatic robes. "The Council has voted to establish cultural exchange programs with humanity," she announced. "They have designated me as the primary liaison for these programs." Curiously, they noted that my exposure to human concepts has made me more effective. As a diplomat, not less. Marcus couldn't hide his smile. Emotions making you more efficient? That must have confused them. Indeed, Ixara agreed, and Marcus could swear he detected the faintest hint of amusement in her voice. They are beginning to understand that what they classified as irrational human behavior actually serves important functions. Beauty inspires innovation. Wonder drives exploration. Connection builds trust between species. She moved to stand. Beside him at the viewport, both of them gazing out at the cosmic tapestry beyond. I have been teaching young Zephyrians about human concepts of aesthetics and creativity. They find it ... intriguing. Many have begun creating what you might call art. And the High Council allows this? They have classified it as experimental research into alternative problem-solving methodologies, Nixara replied. Sometimes, Captain, the most profound changes must begin with acceptable terminology. Marcus laughed, a sound that seemed to surprise Nixara with its warmth. You're learning to speak bureaucrat and poet simultaneously. That's very human of you. Nixara looked down at the pressed flower on her robes, touching it gently. This simple object changed everything. Not because it restored my emotions, they remain properly regulated, but because it proved that value exists beyond utility. My people are beginning to understand that efficiency without beauty is like starlight without wonder, technically functional, but missing something essential. As they stood together in comfortable silence, Marcus realized that this was how real change happened, not through grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but through small moments of connection that proved beauty and wonder were not weaknesses to be eliminated, but strengths to be cultivated. Thank you, Captain, Nixara said softly, for showing me that describing beauty doesn't require words. Sometimes it only requires the courage to preserve something precious and share it with another soul. Marcus smiled, watching the stars dance in the reflection of her dark eyes. Thank you for teaching me that the most powerful changes begin with a single moment of understanding. In the distance, the nebula continued its eternal dance, painting the darkness with colors that served no logical purpose except to remind the universe that beauty, like truth, existed independent of any need to justify itself. The Terran empires. First contact had succeeded not through superior technology or diplomatic cunning, but through humanity's greatest gift, the ability to find and share wonder in the impossible beauty of existence itself.